from home and or stuck in inclement weather. So hopefully everyone's safe and warm today, and we'll step through. Again, Q&A, feel free to put in the window. So today we're going to talk mostly about Office 365, sort of what the service looks like, what the service is, what it isn't, and how we work together as an organization, and how the way our business is structured has changed, and how Office 365 is addressing that, and the services and solutions it offers to some of the business problems you have. So to start, we will step in. So we look at the new era of computing, and it's funny, I laugh at this slide, and I laugh at some of the talk track and thought process that the cloud is somehow new. That the cloud and moving to this centralized computing model is a new idea or something radical in our industry. In fact, it's very, very old. We've been doing this since the inception of computing. This is where we began. And we moved away from it because networks weren't that great, and our connectivity wasn't great. So we moved to that decentralized model, moved to the personal computer, moved to the single-use server, put servers as close as we can to the users. And now we're migrating back because that centralized model is more efficient from a management and IT support standpoint. The functionality just wasn't there when we were, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So this is not new. This is very old, and we're moving back towards this centralized model in IT. Whether it's in what we call the private cloud, or your infrastructure, your hosted environment, or your hosted cloud with your own virtualization, or a dedicated hosted environment such as something like Windows Azure, or a multi-tenant hosted environment or a SaaS offering such as Office 365. So again, moving to this centralized model is going to help us maintain the environment while still offering redundancy, but also help us serve that new era of computing and what we're doing moving forward. So as we look at that, the agenda for today, what is Office 365? Where is your infrastructure? Where is your information? Where is your data? How do you get access to it? And then how do all the workloads fit together? How do you do identity management? How do you use the different components of Office 365? So we'll start with the most important, and I spend a lot of time level setting what is Office 365, right? So when we look at where Microsoft is and where it's moving, right? We've talked about all these wonderful tools, and we all utilize these wonderful tools, but we just want to host them. And people have been hosting mail and hosting services forever. Microsoft has just gotten into it themselves. And what's different about Office 365 is the scale at which it's done at. But what's the same is the fact that it's Exchange, it's SharePoint, it's Lync. So Exchange is Exchange. I don't care if you're running Exchange on premise, if you're running it in a dedicated hosted environment, or you're running it in Office 365. Exchange has the same features and functionality across all three modalities. SharePoint and Lync, we'll talk about those specifically at the end. There's a few technical gotchas still that exist with those, but at the end of the day, SharePoint Online is the same bits that you install on premise. Right? Lync Online is the same bits that you install on premise. There is no difference. There's a couple of technical hurdles that take one or two pieces of functionality out of those two applications. So that may still keep them on-prem in your particular environment. But 99% or 95% of the customers can utilize the services online and don't need to move it on-premise. So, but there's a couple other pieces that come into it as well. So there is Office Pro Plus, which is full-blown Office. This is not Office web apps, right? We'll talk about the web-based version of the applications in a minute. This is simply subscribing to the license for Office for your organization so that you can be using the latest and greatest and get all those wonderful SA benefits. One of the real reasons this exists is not every customer is not necessarily on an enterprise agreement with Microsoft and has software assurance and has access to the latest and greatest. But if you move to an Office 365 subscription, then you have the ability to have access to the latest and greatest and to use those more modern workloads that are there. We also have Project Online and Visio, the other pieces of Office and the Office suite that now exist online and are accessible to us in our organization. So again, the goal here is to keep you on the latest and greatest, to keep you on the most current version with minimal effort on your part, so that way you can be getting the most out of your Microsoft experience. So what does it include? So Office Pro Plus, just that. It is full-blown Office Pro Plus. Again, able to be installed, locally, full MSI package. It's a 5-to-1 ratio for a user, so a user has permission to install it in up to 5 places. However, you're not on the hook when that user is terminated in order to make sure they stop using it. For those of you who are using Office 2013 already, you'll realize that you log into Office now, so Office has some identity built into it. When you terminate a person's Office 365 account, that will actually terminate the license for that installed version of Office, and they'll be presented with a pop-up saying they need to go procure their own license key for their Office install and be given, I believe, 60 days to do so. But you are no longer on the hook. But your users have the ability to just install it themselves and then make use of it. Through great technology like Click to Run, when your users log into the portal, it's simply a one-button click for them to install and upgrade their Office version with no effort on the IT side needed in order to push out that Office application. So again, at the end of the day, though, it's Office, right? It's no different than buying Office. If you're already subscribing to Office on an enterprise agreement, there are transition SKUs if you move to Office 365 where they sort of trade off the on-prem, the EA-based one to the Office 365-based one. At the end of the day, it's really no different to your user. SharePoint Online. So SharePoint Online is, again, same bits as we use on-premise. We have access to all the My Sites, the tasks, the features and functions. We'll talk a little bit later on. I've got a specific section on SharePoint that we'll talk about towards the end of the webinar about some of the concerns you may have or things you need to look at in the different modalities for SharePoint. Then there's Lync. Lync, again, we'll talk about some of those differences a little later on. We're going to focus on Exchange to start. But Lync is, again, PC to PC audio, IM, presence, voice, video, all of those workloads, full calendar integration with your Outlook client. It is Lync. We'll talk about what it isn't later on, but it's Lync. It's the same bits. So it's the same IM capabilities and features and functions that you're used to if you had it on premise. Then we come to Exchange. So Exchange is sort of the core, and I'd say probably 80% of the organizations I talk to, Exchange is where they start, right? They're interested in SharePoint. Maybe they're already doing Lync, or they're looking at Lync, or they're looking to expand their SharePoint. Most people start with Exchange, or that's where the conversation is, right? They're either running an older version of Exchange and it's time for an upgrade, they're ready to go to 2013, and they're looking at moving forward. And to be honest, Exchange is probably the most tested and tried and true because people have been hosting Exchange since its inception. This is, again, not new. This has been done by local hosting providers and partners for years. It's now Microsoft is doing it themselves and hosting it themselves and putting it out there in a redundant manner to give you access to it. And again, full Outlook integration, OWA, you do have antivirus, anti-spam, which is now referred to as Exchange Online Protection. So it used to be Forefront Online Protection for Exchange, or FOAP, and now it has changed to Online Protection for Exchange, or EOP, or Exchange Online Protection, I'm sorry, EOP is the new name for it. So we have full support for mobile clients. There is a hosted BES option. However, most customers I talk to, I definitely advocate that they move to an ActiveSync platform and get off the BES, but there is a hosted BES option if you need it. And then email archiving and compliance. So we'll talk a little bit about more of that in depth as we go forward. The other key is 50 gigs per mailbox, right? So one of the reasons for that size, and this goes into an Exchange 2013 sort of mentality, really nothing to do with Office 365 per se, in that we want everything to migrate back to the mailbox, right? PSTs are now bad again. We don't want PST files anywhere. We don't want mail in different places. We want all mail in the inbox. And a couple of technology changes have happened over the past couple of years which have really enabled this. The first is Office 2013. One of the reasons we kept the OST file small in an Outlook environment and moved to PSTs was because the OST file got corrupted, and it got corrupted fairly easily, and we'd have to do the scan PST on the OST file and fix it. Whereas now, that doesn't happen. You know, with an 8 gig, 10 gig, 20 gig, 30 gig OST file, that corruption doesn't happen anymore. So we can have a big inbox, and we're okay with that. And one of the big reasons we want to do that is all around e-discovery and information and content management. So there's a concept that started in SharePoint but has bled over to Exchange now of there, you know, in SharePoint we would say there's no such thing as a Word document. There's no such thing as a PowerPoint or an Excel spreadsheet. They don't exist, right? Now we have time off request forms, project status updates, capital request forms, TPS reports, right? A couple of you are giggling. Hopefully you get that joke. You know, you have the different items that appear in SharePoint. So you remove Word docs and we replace it with all of that because it's a content type and we need to manage this content the way it is. Because it's a time off request form, you know, we're going to keep it for a year and then we're going to automatically delete it. The same concept applies to Exchange now. So an Exchange 2013 feature that exists are all the transport layer based rules where we start applying these policies to certain content types. If an email contains a social security number, it falls under HIPAA or mass privacy or some other law. Based on HIPAA, I need to delete this message after a year. So as long as it stays in the inbox and my policy has been applied to it, after a year that email will be automatically deleted to be in compliance with the law. Or if it's a sales contract or a sales negotiation, this document needs to be kept for 7 years because we've determined it's a sales contract. And because the transport layer rules saw sales contract in the title or saw that the sales group was CC'd or saw that it contained a PO number that we've identified, it automatically flagged it as a sales contract and that mail is retained for 7 years. So you got all these transport layer rules now. These are all Exchange 2013 functions, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud. And you'll see that a lot as we go through today. It's not necessarily a cloud discussion, it's an Exchange 2013 discussion. It's just a question of where you want to host it. So we have this nice 50 gig mailbox, and that the 25 is still there because it upped as of last fall. So, you know, it's an ever-evolving and growing inbox. So we want that storage, we want that availability there. Okay? So, and then from a control and efficiency standpoint, it's still Exchange. You can still use PowerShell. If you want to connect to the environment and run PowerShell scripts to do things, you can. If you want to go to the web browser and manage the environment from a browser, you can. There's actually even an iPad app that just came out that is an Office 365 admin console for the iPad. So Microsoft has made it extraordinarily easy to manage this environment, right, to continue moving forward. And that's another big misconception we deal with Office 365 is that somehow people think it's going to reduce headcount in IT or it's going to change fundamentally the way the IT department works. And that's actually not true because at the end of the day, it's still Exchange. It still needs to be managed. Now, what I am removing is the need to change a hard drive out at 2 in the morning or to manage the SAN storage, or to do backups. So I'm removing some of those workloads. And then you can take that time you have and utilize it to use the application better. So your mail administrator can actually spend more time using the tools that exist in the product. Because most customers use about 20 to 30% of the functionality that exists within Exchange. Why? Because we spend so much time keeping the lights on. We spend so much time dealing with hard drives and other things and the infrastructure that we don't have time to utilize the application. So that's the shift. That's what we want. We want to take away some of that infrastructure requirement and instead put it on utilizing the application. So that's really the key. So we'll go into some of that and how it works. So benefits. I mean, obvious benefits are that high availability, right? And we're going to talk about that more in a moment. You do have access to Office apps and the web-based versions of the applications through the SharePoint portal and through other portals, where you have the ability to edit a Word document from within the browser. So again, if you go from the work case of working from an iPad or an Android tablet, going into a web browser, opening up a Word document that's on your library and editing it. Always up to date. That's the other big thing, right? So many organizations I talk to, I'm still dealing with organizations on Exchange 2003, which of course is end of life come April, and if they're a publicly traded company, it's actually illegal for them to be on Exchange 2003 as of April 30th, and they're still on it. So for whatever reason, because we're spending so much energy keeping the lights on, we're not pushing the business forward, we're not making use of those new applications. So we always want that up-to-date experience. We want to deploy things. We want to make it easier for IT to not have to worry about that, but instead to use the apps. Optimize experience for different devices. So again, one of the design concepts that went into both the on-prem and Office 365 version, and is a design concept overall in the Microsoft solution set now, is the right information to the right user at the right time, regardless of device. So we want to get you that data, and we don't care what device you're on. We want that data to look and feel the same on all your different modalities so that no matter what you're dealing with, you have access to that data. To that end, the OWA experience has been unified, so across all browsers, looks the same, looks a lot like Outlook. There's actually even an app that's come out for the iPad for the OWA experience, so that OWA experience can, not just through a browser, if someone is very app-centric, can be done through an app. Windows 8.1, that look and feel of the Mail app on an RT tablet is the same as OWA now. We want that one consistent look and feel all the way down through the phones. Industry trusted certifications. So again, when we're talking about certifications, your SAS 70, your HIPAA, your FISMA, your FERPA, all of these different certifications, we have them. They're secure. The Microsoft data centers are more secure than anything anybody has on-prem. And I gladly throw that challenge out there because the Microsoft data centers actually have armed guards in front of them. And most data centers, 99% of the data centers I deal with clients, they do not have armed guards at the data center for a physical security level, right? The data is encrypted at rest. Microsoft can never view your data. Microsoft can't scan your data. They can't do anything. It's encrypted at rest. You're the only one who can view your data. Services, the SLA. So 3 nines is, I get a lot of questions about the 3 nines. So most services are running closer to 4 or 5 nines. And when we measure the different services, we don't measure them, we don't measure Exchange in its entirety. When you go and look at the reports, you're actually able to break down each segment. So ActiveSync versus OWA versus connecting to Outlook, right? RPC over HTTP or MAPI over HTTP moving forward. All of those protocols and all of those different modalities are tracked separately, so we're able to really see those SLAs and see what we're doing and how to track them. So again, reliable service. Knock on wood, mail flow hasn't stopped in Office 365 since its rollout. There have been a couple of small pockets where ActiveSync had issues. Those, of course, always make headline news, but other than that, mail flow keeps up and running, right? Customers, it just works. Again, any questions, feel free to put them in the IM window. So where's your data actually stored? What do these data centers actually look like, and where is it, and where is it stored? So from a Microsoft global footprint, there are really 3 pools of data centers, right? One in America, one in Asia Pac, and one in Europe. So depending on the address you use when you sign up will determine where your data is stored. So if you're a US-based company and use your US address, when you sign up for your account, you will be based in the US data centers. Your data will never be replicated into the other pools, ever, even if you want it to. So that's a key thing for multinational organizations where your data is going to stay resident in one of the pools, not multiple. You could set up a different tenancy in a different country if you wanted, but it would have to be a different namespace. So you could do ABC Co-Europe, ABC Co-US, and do 2 different namespaces, 2 different email addresses, and host it into 2 different environments if you wanted to. So your data stays resident in that pool, never leaves it, is redundant. There are I think 9 data centers now in the US total. We'll get into that a little more in a second. Then there are edge nodes. No content is actually stored there, but they are basically way stations for people to get quicker access to the data if they are in these countries. So again, all of those networks are connected, and when we look at the US a little more closely, right, and it'll be the same for Europe or for Asia Pac, again, we have data centers across the regions. My slide's taking time. There we go. So we have data centers across the regions, and then we have those edge nodes that exist across, and then we have different sort of last mile providers that are way stations, and then the last mile is yours, right, to consumers, so your connection to the internet. So again, your data stays in these data centers. It is replicated to multiple data centers. I often joke with people, both coasts could fall into the ocean and your email would still be working, right? Well, granted, those of us in the East Coast would have bigger problems. Your data would still, in fact, be up and running. People could still get their mail. So then we take that sort of into our next set here. There we go. Which components will you use, or how will you look at this? So when we talk about identity management and we talk about the different components in the system, identity management is probably one of the biggest considerations when you're going to move. So now, we've talked about, we've got these wonderful services and we've kind of looked at them. We've got your data replicated, your data is accessible, data's out there. How am I going to authenticate to it? And there are 3 real distinct ways to do it. And we spend a lot of time working with customers on this. The first, and I think the best, is Windows Azure Active Directory. For those of you on the call not familiar with Azure, it's Microsoft's hosted infrastructure as a service and platform as a service, where you can do app dev, you can run your .NET codes, your web-based applications, but you can also host your own infrastructure, such as SQL servers, such as your AD or other workloads you can push out to the cloud. Azure is one of the Active Directory federated services within Azure is one of those sort of bundled platform services. So ADFS is using your AD to authenticate users to the cloud. As a note, this isn't necessarily running your AD in the cloud, though you can. And we usually advocate you do, because if you're running ADFS in Azure, but your AD is still on-prem, and your on-prem becomes unavailable, there's a potential for some issues. So we actually usually do advocate that you run an AD server up in Azure, you run the ADFS servers up in Azure, and now you've got a truly bulletproof, redundant environment, right? It's enabling that single sign-on, not just for Office 365, but for other applications as well. And when we think about this, it's the Facebook model, right? So when you think about all these different web-based applications we do on a consumer level now, how many of them let you log in with your Facebook identity, right? And you go to these websites and it says, click here to log in with Facebook. And that's a great service, because now you're maintaining one username and password, your Facebook one, and using that to log into multiple different services. Same concept on the corporate level, where we're going to use your Active Directory to authenticate to multiple different SaaS-based offerings, so that you have to maintain identity in one space. And this is critical moving forward, because we can't get to a truly SaaS-based offering or that centralized model without this. Because if you told your users they had to go back to the days of maintaining 15 different usernames and passwords on 15 different systems with 15 different requirements or expiry dates, we've been there, right? That doesn't work. We don't want to go back to that. So it's really key for that single sign-on. So we'll step through a couple of the different areas. Again, when you manage this all up in Azure, you can set it up. It is a pre-canned service for managing this type of environment. So what does it look like from an architecture standpoint? So we have Bob. Bob's out there. Bob needs to log into Office 365. The first way we'll look at this is if you didn't do any single sign-on and you instead managed your identity in the cloud. So Bob goes to authenticate to the service. Windows Azure is out there and running, and Office 365 is actually the authentication tool. And we do an import up into Azure where we have our Active Directory and everything running, and into the Office 365 portal, and off you go. User authenticates to the cloud. Now we can do a dir sync and password sync. This is sort of that middle step now, where authentication is still going to happen in Azure, but we're going to sync it with our on-premise Active Directory. And we're going to keep that dir sync and password sync going, where my environment can, if I create a user in AD, it will automatically create it up in the cloud and get that going. The flaw with this is, if the connection between Azure and my Active Directory is broken, people can still authenticate, but their username and password, none of that's going to change or expire, or they can't reset it. You've lost all control because you're doing this real-time sync, and so you have to get the sync back working again in order to make any changes. The third option, which is the one we recommend for most customers, is the federated identity, where we have that Active Directory federated service running in between on-prem. And again, this ADFS service we're running here, grab my highlighter. So this ADFS server we're running here, a little over exuberant there. So that ADFS service we're running, there we go. Here, we could actually put up in the cloud as well and not actually have to run that on-prem. And we do that because we want to minimize the need for your on-premise environment, right? Because your connection here is what's most susceptible, right? Most organizations are maybe not as rock solid on their WAN failover as Office 365 or Azure is, right? So if you have, 4 multiple connections at different environments, and you're running ADFS at all 4 environments, then you're probably good. You're at least on par with where Azure is. Whereas if you're not at that, if you're at a single location or a single data center and with a single internet pipe, or even redundant internet pipes at a single data center, you still have an issue, right? Because if that connection severs, then no one can get to ADFS, and if no one can get to ADFS, then nobody can log in. So again, we usually do advocate you run it in the cloud, just to make your life easier. And this is the ultimate way, because now your management doesn't change from what you're doing today. Today, a user comes in, you create them an Active Directory that creates the Exchange account and provisions everything, and you're good to go. By doing ADFS, you're maintaining that mode you're doing now. You're maintaining that same workflow you're doing now for user creation and management. You're not changing anything on your IT staff, and you don't have to maintain identity in 2 different places. Any questions on that? Again, feel free to post into the window. So again, the 3 core identity management tools, again, this is probably the biggest thing when we move people to the cloud that we have to educate them on, and then you have to decide what's best for your organization. Because there is a cost associated with running ADFS in Azure, right? Doing cloud identity is the cheapest because we're not doing really any setup. We're doing single identity in the cloud. Again, usually works on small organizations or small scale, but think about it. If you had 500 users and you had to maintain all of their information in Active Directory, then you had to go to the cloud and maintain all their information in the cloud as well. That creates you're upping the administration, you're upping that need. Again, if you have 20, 30, 40 users, probably okay to do, right? Low turnover, so you have to think about that. And then again, dir sync, pass sync without ADFS, again, can work, but now you're still maintaining identity in 2 places. You're just using some tools to help maintain that. And then the third one, where you're actually doing the maintenance and management on premise. Again, not enough companies think about this. And this goes into, it's funny, I've been doing a couple of deployments the past few weeks, and I was doing a presentation with a customer up in the Northwest, and what stunned them, and I realized I don't talk about it enough, is people have in their head that Office 365 is a cost saver, and it is. But it's not a cost saver in the ways that people necessarily think. It's a cost saver in that you don't have to maintain infrastructure and you don't have to buy servers. You're trading that off for your cost depending on your agreement with Microsoft. So that's one. The second is that when you are doing your next upgrade, you're going to have a significantly reduced cost. However, this upgrade, if you're on 2003, 2007, or 2010 on-prem today, or even 2013 on-prem today, and you're going to the cloud, that is still an Exchange migration. Most people, who are Exchange administrators today, if I said to you, you're going to do a migration from on-prem or to the cloud, you have an understanding of what that cost is and that time investment might be. However, When you're migrating to the cloud, people somehow have it in their head that that's not going to take the same level of effort. And it does. It does, in fact, because you're still migrating all that mail. You're still moving 2 terabytes of mail from one environment to another. You're still migrating all those usernames. You're still migrating all those antivirus, anti-spam password, filters and everything. All of that is still happening. So there is still a cost involved and still planning that has to be done. Again, where the main cost savings is going to come is when you're up on 2013 in the cloud and 2015 or 2016 comes out in a year or two. And the migration to that is going to be significantly reduced for you. So that's something to understand. It's still an Exchange migration project. When we talk about SharePoint, so we talked a lot about Exchange. When we talk about SharePoint, some of the big considerations that have to come in, again, it's the actual bits. It is actually SharePoint. All the same features and functions exist. Nothing is different. You have there is no functionality reduction. However, and I think this slide demonstrates it pretty keenly, is the differences between doing on-prem, Azure, and Office 365. So these are the 3 different ways to deploy SharePoint. When you do it on-prem, you have full control. Hardware, software, processing, and that's the key, processing and storage. When you move to Office 365, you do have full control over the application and how it works. However, what you lose is the ability to scale processing, to scale your compute power. When you are doing advanced BI or you're doing advanced workloads within SharePoint, some recommendations might point to upping the processing power or scale of your SharePoint farm. You can't do that in Office 365. So really advanced BI, doing an Oracle integration, bringing your Oracle ERP in, creating a data cube, slicing it up, handing it out in different ways and dynamic content to different people, may not be the best workload for Office 365 because you have a finite amount of compute. Now, will it work? Yes. But will it work as fast as you want it to? We don't know until we build it and see, right? And we have some pretty good guidance we can give your organization on that, but that's one of those things that we have to look at from a compute standpoint. And when we talk about content management and collaboration portals and social and search and all of those things, that's all great. It's really advanced BI where we look at that workload and we look at that compute power. And that's where Azure comes in. If you still want that cloud service, you still want that ability to get the infrastructure out of your data center and host it, Azure can do that. And if you need more compute in Azure, it's elastic. You can just take more compute or take more storage and use it. So you have that elasticity when you host it in Windows Azure. So that's sort of that middle step. So as an organization, you have to understand, what are you doing with SharePoint? What's your business goal? Are you doing really deep advanced BI? In which case, we might talk about on-premise still or in Azure. Are you looking at just content collaboration, portals, looking at things, sharing documents, large documents outside your organization, and partnering in extranets and intranets? Well, that's all great in Office 365, and that's what we want to put there. And a lot of organizations do a hybrid for their SharePoint deployments, meaning they may run an Azure and on-prem environment, but they'll still deploy an Office 365 tenancy for their extranets, right? So when I'm sharing my content, I'm not sharing out stuff from my internal SharePoint farm. I'm sharing it from Office 365, and I'm hosting my extranets there. I'm hosting certain team sites or project sites, maybe the sales team site, right? Your sales team is usually very mobile. They're not beholden to the on-prem infrastructure, so hosting them in the cloud makes more sense, so they have access to the marketing materials and collateral that they need access to when they're on the road. Again, all sorts of use cases here, and we spend a lot of time working with clients, looking through these different use cases, figuring out what they want to do with SharePoint, and making sure we're getting them situated in the right group that meets their business need. So definitely take this away. This is one of those big things that from a discussion and internal standpoint, understanding what your needs are and what your use cases are is very important. That requirements document, and I found a lot of companies have gotten away from developing a formal requirements document, I think really helps here with both Exchange and SharePoint and even Lync in understanding, going through that checklist and being able to help make that decision. So when we talk about Lync and Exchange on the same function level, a lot of the questions we're going to ask or you should be asking internally are you planning for enterprise voice on Lync, meaning Lync as a phone system? Because that is the one piece of functionality that does not exist in the cloud today. Lync can function as IM presence, peer-to-peer, and conference voice and video. You can host conference calls in it. Either internally or attaching it to a hosted conferencing provider such as Intercall, and do your hosted conference calls through it. However, if you are looking at a PBX integration or a enterprise voice deployment for PBX functionality, or video integration with Polycom systems, right? The minute you say the word integration with Lync, that should translate to on-premise. The minute we start doing integrations, we want to keep it on-premise because we can't do it in the cloud. And it's a simple technological dilemma. It's not even a functional one. It's more of a technological dilemma when we think about it. Your data is in, there's 10 data centers across the U.S. Your data is replicated across any 6 of them. We don't know which 6, but any 6 of them at a time. When your data is replicated, now your Lync environment is running, or people are connecting from any one of these 6 environments. So we would need to do a SIP trunk back to your PBX or a SIP trunk back to your Polycom environment from all 10 data centers, because we don't know which of the 6 you're in or which one a user is connecting to at a given point. So we need 10 SIP connections from 10 different data centers to come back onto your premise to go into that system for integration. Multiply that across the number of customers that Microsoft has in Office 365. It just doesn't work. It doesn't scale. Now, Lync in the cloud is eventually going to be a hosted PBX, right? We're still 12 to 24 months away. Lync conference is coming up in a couple of weeks here, and we're expecting, I'm anticipating maybe some announcements or some information coming out on the roadmap on that over the next couple of years. At some point, it will be a hosted PBX, right? With that Skype integration, it will eventually be a hosted PBX. We're just not there yet. But it will never do integration, right? Even when it becomes a hosted PBX, it will not be able to integrate. You'll have to do a cutover migration. You'll never be able to integrate with your on-premise PBX. Archiving and journaling, 2 very distinct things, and a lot of customers sometimes aren't real good at drawing the distinction between the 2. Archiving exists in Office 365. In fact, you have unlimited archiving in Office 365. You can archive as much mail as you want for as long as you want. There is no cap. What Office 365 doesn't do natively is journaling. So journaling is that permanent copy of a particular mailbox or a particular group of mailboxes for e-discovery. Now you can do legal hold. But the trick with legal hold, as opposed to journaling, once you apply a legal hold to a mailbox or a certain key phrase or word or whatever it may be that you're applying the legal hold to, it freezes all messages. If the message has already been deleted, though, the message was already deleted. Journaling will fix that problem. So again, you have to understand your level of requirements and compliancy that you need. Do you need full journaling? There are tons of great third-party services that do journaling with Office 365. So if it is truly a need, they exist and you can do it. It's just not native in the product. You have to do a third-party service for journaling. But archiving and legal hold, that's included and there and you can do. So again, one of those things that we need to work through with organizations to make sure they understand their requirements around journaling and archiving. The other big thing to think about, are there other applications you're using that aren't simply a mail relay, but actually require something to be installed on a CAS or a hub transport server or one of the other server roles? If you're running a third-party application that requires something to be physically installed on the server, that obviously can't be done in Office 365. You don't have the ability to install anything on the server. Again, mail relays, things like that work fine. It's a question of are there applications, and I know there's some faxing applications, e-faxing software that does have a piece of software that has to be installed on the CAS. run into that a bunch, and that's just not an option. Now, is it worth keeping you out of Office 365? Probably not, because you can go to another e-faxing solution that does support Office 365. So, but definitely something to look at and make sure you've analyzed, as well as knowing all of the applications that are doing relays, right, are using your Exchange server for mail relays. You could stay in a hybrid mode where we are running on-prem services, on-prem servers that are connected to Office 365 and doing a hybrid deployment. However, that increases the complexity. Right now we've got a hybrid environment we have to maintain, and we've got on-prem servers we're still maintaining. And most organizations I talk to, the goal is to move to the cloud. The goal is to move the servers and services up to the cloud. You know, we talked a little bit when we said enterprise voice, you know, conference call needs. What are you doing for conferencing? How is that working? Do you want to bring your conference calls on-premise to save money? Because when you host Lync in Office 365 and you connect it to something like Intercall or Global Crossing for conference calls, you're still paying that per minute charge, right? You're still paying that fee for conference calls for people who are dialing in. Whereas if you host infrastructure on-prem, we can reduce that cost. Now, for most mid-sized and small organizations, that's not going to deter you because the cost usually isn't great. There are some larger organizations I've worked with that spend upwards of $1 million a year on conferencing services. And by moving Lync on-premise, we cut that number in half. Now, we didn't eliminate entirely, but we saved them $500,000 a year in conferencing services. That justified doing it on-premise, right? That justified bringing it in-house. Their ROI was 1 year. The whole project was actually less than a year because the whole project cost them about $250,000 based on their size and scope, and they were in multiple countries. Based on their size, you know, in 6 months they had achieved you know, net zero cost, and within a year they had saved $250,000. So, and then just more savings moving forward. So definitely something to look at. And another big one is unified messaging. And I bring up that because when, you know, we didn't talk too much today about licenses. New Signature, you know, we work with Microsoft and we work with the large account resellers to help you figure out which licenses are right for you. So we know a lot, but we want to make sure we've involved the people you buy your licenses from in that conversation as well. So understanding, are you using standard or enterprise-based features on-premise today, right? So that way we can help you translate that to which of the plans and SKUs are correct for you in the cloud, whether it be, you know, the E3 SKU, which is maybe more equivalent to the enterprise feature set, versus the E1 SKU, which is more equivalent to the standard feature set on premise, right? Understanding what your needs are, understanding your usage, so that we can figure out the right license level for you so that we're replicating that functionality. So hopefully through today, you've seen, you know, Office 365 is the future of Microsoft. This is where they're invested. And in fact, to take it a step further, something I didn't realize I'd be talking about today, if you saw the announcement yesterday of the new appointment of the new CEO of Microsoft, that person came from the Office 365 Cloud Group, right? That Microsoft, I think, very deliberately chose a person from that organization because that is the future of Microsoft. This is cloud-based services is where Microsoft is going. They're always going to support the on-prem version. They're always going to support people doing it. There is, you know, no sign of that stopping. However, the cloud is first. The cloud is the priority. You know, Office 365 is a loosely coupled but consistent set of services. It's Exchange, it's Lync, it's SharePoint. You don't have to buy them all, though. If you want to just buy Exchange, you can. If you want to just buy Lync, you can. There's nothing that forces you to use them all if there's a particular workload that you just need just one of. Again, new capabilities, as I said, are going to come to Office 365 first. That's where new development's going to happen first, and then it's going to be brought on-prem. And then again, cloud computing doesn't eliminate the need for IT or doesn't eliminate headcount, but it does change some of what we're doing, right? Your Exchange admin can focus on being an Exchange admin and not having to worry about hard drives and OS patches and all of those other things that you have to worry about. Instead, you can focus on using the application, using the functionality, and using the feature set that exists. So with that, It was exactly 45 minutes. I'd like to open it up to questions. Not too many people on. It's a snowy day, bad weather out, so I understand. But if there are any questions, feel free to post them in the Q&A section here, and I'll be happy to address them. So, question here, I understand the benefit of moving away from PSTs, but what will happen if a user has local PSTs but uses Exchange Online? So, we don't eliminate the ability to use PSTs. They can absolutely still use them. We just want to discourage them, right? Any of us who have done support for years and been managing desktop environments or managing customers, we've all had that situation where we're replacing a user's laptop and the PST, they're a power user and they have PSTs hidden in places we don't know about, or it failed to get copied and you're missing an email from 5 years ago and the user gets very, very upset and we're off hunting for that PST. We've all had that happen, right? So that's what we're trying to avoid. We're also trying to avoid the whole e-discovery problem, right? So once a file is moved into a PST, we've lost control of it centrally. We can't archive it. We can't do some of the things we may want to do with it. We've given up that control to the user, and that's what we want to take back. We want to keep, especially in the way our rules work and the way the laws are written now and the way compliance is going, once you hit a certain size as an organization, or once you're public, or once you're dealing with certain industries, PSTs just become very difficult to manage and make it very hard to be compliant with some of the laws and rules out there. So again, doesn't prevent them from using it. They can still have them, but we just don't want to encourage them. We want to get rid of them. There are actually tools that will go out and grab the PST and drag it back into the inbox we use when we're doing migrations, that will go out and take the PST and move it back to the inbox for the user, and then we can migrate everything up into the cloud. So that way we can get away from doing it. Whether or not you go to Office 365, Exchange 2010 and really 2013, this was a design concept. We want to get away from PSTs. Look, we understand why we needed them, right? We had to have them because if you had more than a gig, in 2007, if you had more than a gig or two OST file, it got corrupted often and you had to use the tools to rebuild it. That's no longer the case. We fixed that problem. We've built all these wonderful e-discovery and management tools. If you look at some of the e-discovery tools now in Exchange 2013, they not only search mail, but they also search the SharePoint libraries for all content related to that same topic. And you can actually archive your Lync IM sessions in your Exchange Mail Store so that now all your IMs are also getting searched by that same e-discovery tool, right? So now you've got one e-discovery tool that's searching all your data sets and presenting that data back to you. All sorts of cool things like that exist, but only if we get away from PSTs, right? We can get them back in the inbox. So again, supported, but we just want to get away from it. It's the same concept around public folders as well, right? Public folders were brought back in 2013. They had gone away in the previous version. They did bring back public folders, but public folders belong more appropriately in SharePoint, right? We belong that data, the shared calendars, that's more of a SharePoint functionality moving forward. So we want to get away from public folders as much as we can and move that information, right? All SharePoint libraries now have a mailbox assigned to them. We can do that shared calendar, so definitely something to look at. So next question, are there tools in Exchange Online to manage the archiving? So yes, you can archive whatever you want. Again, you set your retention policies. You set when you want to archive things. You set when you want to store them and put them away and not have them affect the user's inbox anymore and go away. Again, with a 50 gig mailbox, doesn't do too much. But again, that archiving is just going to take them out of the inbox and archive them away. They can still be accessed and deleted, right? So that's the real difference between journaling and everything. So again, with a 50 gig mailbox, the need for archiving, again, why did we do archiving? Someone had 10 gigs of mail, 8 gigs of it is old, stale, we don't need it in the inbox, we don't need it synchronizing, we just want the stub. So we archive it just to keep the OST down, just to keep that smaller. So are there guidance? No, it's your best practice. We all know the rule though, most mail over 6 weeks old is never looked at again, right? Yes, someone might have 5 years worth of mail in their inbox, but the stuff that's older than 6 weeks, they never look at. So definitely you can do. And then there was also a question about what about retaining a mailbox? So when you can deactivate a user and the mailbox isn't deleted, you deactivate their license, but the mailbox isn't trashed. If you do trash a mailbox by accident, you have up to 30 days to recover it and bring it back. But just like on-prem, you delete the license and you can still access the mailbox or migrate the mail into someone else's mailbox or give access to it. So all of those same functionalities are there as on-premise. So you can do all of those things that you would want to do. And again, as far as guidance, it really is case to case, and we have some use cases we can give you for when you archive. Again, understanding the difference between archiving and journaling is the key. Just because it's archived doesn't mean it can't be deleted. It still can be deleted just because it's archived. Archive is not a saving process, right? Now, what a lot of people have done when it's on premise is they may be archiving somewhere and then backing up the archive. You can do that, but that's not journaling, right? So journaling is really the way to do it moving forward if you want to save everything coming into a particular mailbox or with a particular subject line. Excellent. Well, thank you very much for the time today. I don't see any other questions. So we will definitely post the slide for those who want it, and we look forward to working with you. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you very much. Stay safe, stay warm, and have a great day.